Welcome back, survivor. If you can hear this, it means you're still alive. This is Jack's Nightmares, and this is your next story. It's just after 6 in the morning. I'm standing under the towers at Hampton Roads, watching the floodlights flicker like dying bugs against the sea mist. The outer grid struggling again. Not a surprise. We're pulling power from old naval cables that weren't meant to last this long, and the salt water eats through every patch job we do. The backup loop is barely holding together, same as everything else in this place. I've been stationed here 12 years, senior checkpoint officer. Name's Malcolm Braddock, 45 years old. No family, no illusions left. I run the inbound control point where convoys bring in what's left of the good stuff. Plasma, fuel ethanol, filtration kits, serum cartridges. Half of it's real, half of it's counterfeit, and all of it passes through my gates under armed inspection. I make the calls. What gets in, what gets held, what gets buried. The war never ended, it just changed shape. There's no front line anymore, just fences, trade routes, and the infected. The undead are still out there, moving slow now, worn down by the years. Their flesh dries out if they don't stay in shade or humidity. But they haven't stopped. Not really. We clear out pockets all the time. Basement nests in old malls, flooded tunnels, stalled ferries packed with husks that twitch when the wind shifts. The real threat isn't just the walking dead. It's what's keeping them from disappearing entirely. We still don't understand how the pathogen works. It's not airborne, not stable in water, but it passes in blood and fluid. It lodges in brain tissue, reactivates after death. Everything we've done for 20 years has been about slowing that process down. The ST43 serum, the suppressor, is the closest thing we've ever had to a functional treatment. It doesn't cure the infection, it just holds it back. Long as a maintained worker doses every 18 hours, they can keep going. Take that dose late, even by a few hours, and it starts slipping through. First the light sensitivity, then the jaw tension, then motor drift. Some of them make it back in time, some don't. And getting that serum isn't simple. It takes fresh blood from the infected, harvested within a few hours of death. It needs plasma from uninfected donors with specific markers. It needs refrigerated labs, filters, power. It's why the checkpoints exist, because the labs only work if supply chains stay secure. And it's why people like me stand here every day with sidearms on our hip and steel barricades under our boots. I carry a machete on my left side, worn grip, black tape at the hilt. It's not for ceremony. I've used it in tight spaces, when gunfire would bring more infected than I could handle. My sidearms are 9mm with chipped sights and a rubberized grip. When I leave the gate for fieldwork, I bring a short-barreled tactical rifle, chambered in 7.62, but that's only for open terrain and bad days. Today's already looking like one of those. 6 in the morning and gate techs already on the comm, telling me the west relay's shorting out again. Scanner bay isn't getting stable power. I tell her to kill the surge line and reset the breaker, but I know it won't last. The sea air corrodes everything. Contacts, seals, our patience. Some mornings I think this checkpoint will rust out before we get a proper replacement hub built. I step outside the control booth and scan the horizon. Tide's low. That's good. Less water pooled around the support columns under the bridge means fewer nests forming. Dormants like humidity. They pile up in the wet spaces, lean against each other like mannequins, twitching at noise. We torch the piles every couple of weeks, but they always return. Not because they're hunting anything in particular, just because the structure gives them cover. They linger, they settle, and when the weather shifts or a fuel line echoes too loud, they rise. Checkpoint Alpha goes live at 6:30. That's the inbound route from Roanoke and Richmond. Today we're expecting 6 armored vehicles. Joint supply East Manifest. Ethanol, gauze, cartridge racks. If it checks out, it'll be routed straight to the naval lab for lot verification. If anything's out of sequence, we hold it, tear it apart, and trace it backward. I stop at the merchant corral. 2 civilian traders are haggling with Corporal Dent over intake paperwork. One of them's got a cooler tagged for the Seagate Field Clinic, but the label is handwritten and the lot code looks smudged. Probably intentional. People fake minor errors so it buys them time if they get stopped mid-run. If they make it through, they get paid. If they don't, they pretend it was just a clerical slip. Dent wants to cuff them. I tell him to hold them in the side bay, locked. No need for restraints unless they start yelling. I'll check the vials myself after the main convoy clears. If they're real, they get processed. If not, they'll end up on reclamation duty for a month, sorting scrap outside the safe zone until they earn back access. That's how it works now. Nobody gets free rides. Wind's rising, the kind that carries sea rot and dust in the same breath. My jacket's too heavy, but I keep it on until the sun breaks. From the watchtower I see the inbound trucks approaching. 6 total as expected. The lead rig's got the right seal. Joint Supply Group East, blue on white. Second one's already got rust across the side doors. That's not ideal. Third one's missing a front plate, which means someone back there doesn't care much about documentation. I mark it on the pad. Convoy pulls into the processing lane just before 6:40. Standard entry drill. Drivers stay seated. Escorts dismount. Hands visible. Safety's on. I recognize Sergeant Varro from prior runs. She's solid. No nonsense, squared away. She hands over the logs while I walk down the line. First truck. Good seal. Internal cooler checks out. 3 full racks of ST-43 in foam casings. Serial numbers match. Temperature strips hold steady. If this goes to maintain teams by 4, we'll have 3 shifts covered for sewer operations in Norfolk proper. Second truck has ethanol drums. Labels are half legible. I check the rings. Some aren't stamped. I ask the driver for his backup manifest. He mutters, opens the glove box, hands over a sheet that's water damaged and half torn. I flag it. Doesn't mean it's fake, just lazy. The labs will sort it out. Third truck, the one without a plate, raises my suspicion immediately. Driver's pale, thin, looks dehydrated or strung out. I ask for his cargo log. He hesitates, then hands me a copy with mismatched fonts and numbers that don't line up. I ask Dent to flank. Varro's backup holds position on the right. We open the rear gate. Boxes inside are marked as alkaline medical fluid. I pull 1, slosh test, too thin, pop the seal. Inside the first layer, expired IV bags, mostly deflated. Beneath that, amber vials. No markings, no origin label, no serials. Black market serum. Might be real, might be bunk. Either way, it's contraband. If that gets into circulation and fails mid-dose, it kills maintained workers in seconds. Not a metaphor, I've seen it. Full neurological collapse, body spasms, bloody eyes. Nothing we can do. I order the driver detained. Truck gets locked down. I call for a lab runner to sample the vials. If it's fake, we trace it. If it's stolen, we check which lot number disappeared. Either way, someone further up the chain is going to feel this. The rest of the convoy clears. Final vehicle logs match, no discrepancies. The sun's up now, bright off the salt flats and steel mesh. I pull my jacket off, stow it on the hook. Just as I step down from the tower, my comm crackles. Sector 12, movement under bridge, low crawl, 3 contacts, not responding to light, no insignia. I stop moving. That's the old flood line under the southwest approach. Half submerged 2 weeks ago. It dries fast in heat, makes a perfect shade pocket. Dormants gather there sometimes. If it's 3 bodies moving together and crawling, it's not scavengers. Could be maintained, but the comm report doesn't match posture or gear. I call in, hold position, no flares, no vocal challenge. Do not engage unless contact is made. I'm en route. I grab my pistol, machete still on my hip, and start moving. The day was already leaning bad. Now it's heading somewhere worse. I cut across the gravel apron behind the inspection sheds and take the maintenance stairs under the southwest approach. The salt air grows heavy, mixed with the sour smell that hangs around any place the walking dead nest for long. Water gurgles in the drainage slot cut into the concrete. The echo down here is deceptive. A step can sound like a dozen. I keep the pistol low, machete ready in my left hand, and I push my back against the barrier, so the first look I take is clean. 3 bodies crawl in the shadow under the bridge, exactly where the guard called them. Clothing hangs in strips. One drags a leg with a long tear from hip to knee. Heads lift, then stop, as if noise takes a second to reach whatever they have left inside. Dormants waking. Heat from the rising sun hits the metal above and drips warmth into this pocket, and that is enough to stir them. I signal the guard posted above to hold fire. We have distance, and I want quiet. There is a narrow concrete ledge that runs under the bridge pins. That ledge can give me a straight angle to take them one by one. I slide along it. Slow. The machete edge is not pretty, but it bites. The first one lurches when I get within 10 feet. It turns its face toward me. The skin is dry and tight. The eyes move without a blink. I step in and bring the blade down through the base of the skull. No chatter, no shot. The sound is wet but brief, and the body slackens. The second tries to rise and spills forward. I step behind and finish it the same way. The third is faster, fresh enough to still have that initial burst some of them get. It snaps, grabs at the ledge, and pulls itself halfway up. I pivot, press its head to the concrete with my boot, and cut across the spine line. It shudders and goes still. I count 10 in my head, and watch for any twitch that means I misread the signals. Nothing. I signal up to the guard and wave him forward with a foam can and a bag. We seal the cuts with a quick layer, tag the bodies, and note the time. A body retrieval crew will come take them within the hour. The lab wants fresh samples when possible, and we need the space cleared before the tide changes. The guard eyes the blood and gulps. He is new. I tell him to keep his gloves on until he is back topside and to rinse with saline only. He nods too fast and backs away. I do not say anything else. He will either toughen up or wash out. On the way up, I take a longer look under the girders, scanning for more shapes. No additional movement. The nest must have been small. That fits the pattern for this stretch in late summer. The humidity has been lower, so they do not pile as deep. The risk is always the ones that sit still for days until some idiot fires a weapon in the tunnel. That echo brings them by the dozen. I climb the last set of steps and check my watch. 6:55 in the morning. Back at the gate, Corporal Dent is waiting with his eyebrows set like he just bit into bad news. He says the detained driver from Truck 3 is asking for me by name. That never means anything good. I tell Dent to get the lab runner for the amber vials first. Then I head to the south inspection shed. The building used to be a toll booth, if you can believe that. Now it is 4 rooms thick and lined with steel and rubber so noise does not carry. The driver sits on a bench with his hands cuffed in front. He looks older than he did through the windshield. Late 40s maybe. Sunken cheeks, cracked lips. He has the look of someone who has been living on low-grade ethanol and scavenged canned food. I stand at the door and make him speak first. He tells me he knows me from Old Point Comfort, claims he brought me coffee once when I was posted there during the flood 3 years ago. I do not remember him. He says he has a family in Phoebus and that he took the job because the middleman promised clean serum pulled from an approved lab. He was supposed to move it fast and hand it to specific buyers in Norfolk. He did not ask questions. He wanted the payment in ration credits. He needs those credits to move his kids inside the safer housing block this winter. I ask for the middleman's name. He gives it up without fighting, which tells me he is either scared past the point of holding anything back, or he is lying to cut a deal. The name means something. I have heard it in trader talk near Willoughby Spit. A dockside sorter with just enough authority at Craney Island to get trailer keys. Not a mastermind, a cog. I bring in the lab runner. She takes 2 vials in a sealed tray, tags them, and leaves without a word. The driver watches her go and tries another plea. He says he did not know the lot was dirty. I do not promise anything. I tell him his cargo is now evidence and he will sit tight until we verify the contents. If the vials are clean but stolen, he faces bonded labor and forfeiture of his route. If they are dirty, he faces tribunal. He nods like he expected worse. Maybe he did. By 7:30, the sun is over the mesh and the heat starts to rise off the asphalt. I walk the gate lane and listen to the engines idle. The merchant pair in the side bay are quieter now. They can feel which way the wind is blowing. A field medic checks the first convoy driver for a rash that turned up on his neck. It looks like contact irritation from an old collar, not fungal. He gets cleared. The ethanol drums go to the tank farm with 2 guards. I make a note to test 3 random drums before we blend anything. Someone always tries to stretch a batch with water. We have caught more than one community doing it to make quota. Desperation pushes bad decisions. The radio on my belt chirps and I answer. The voice is dispatch. A convoy near Newport News reports a pack building up along the noise barrier beside the interstate. That is past our fence but still part of the larger corridor. The team asks for permission to skirt onto the shoulder and pass on engine brake only. I approve the bypass and tell them to move at slow roll. No horn, no flashes. The packers along that curve cue off the first lunge. If one gets a hand on a door, the whole line turns into a mess. I take 15 minutes to walk the perimeter and check the water traps. 1 rat, 2 broken bottles, 1 child's shoe left near the stack, and that is never a good sign, but the camera logs show no one small came near the fence overnight. Someone probably used it to distract a guard during an exchange. People get creative when a rule stands between them and an extra ration. I pocket the shoe and decide I will drop it in lost items at the office. Someone will lie and claim the thing. At least the lie will bring him in the door. Dent meets me at the foot of the tower and says the lab wants me in person. That tone is not the usual. I head to the small analysis bay built right onto the old toll shell. 2 techs are at the counter with a portable reader. The amber vial sample runs show a serum fraction that matches the base profile for ST43, but there is a contaminant in the carrier. Not a bacterial bloom, a stabilizer imbalance. The kicker is the serial drift. The protein pattern sits between 2 known lots. That means someone diluted real serum with something cheaper and relabeled it. Cut product, not fake outright, which makes it even worse. The tech points to the graph. The failure risk would not be immediate on a well-maintained person who is on schedule and healthy. It would hit the ones who are already close to the edge due to exertion, poor diet, or a missed dose. It would show as a delayed crash within hours. The tech says 2 words quietly, field murders. She does not say them like a dramatist. She says them like a person who has seen it happen. I stand there for a full 10 seconds, and then I ask for the chain of custody paperwork. We log everything. We seal the rest of the vials and move them to evidence. I call the officer who oversees bonded labor intake and tell him to prep a cell. The driver goes under lock until we get names that make sense. He will get food, water, and a blanket. He will not get movement without 2 escorts. He does not fight when we come to move him. He looks at the floor and steps where Dent tells him to step. Word will travel. It always does. The small rings keep their ears close to the fence line. If I move too slow, the middleman runs. If I move too fast and loud, I scare off the donor roots that keep the lab alive. Balance is what keeps this place from snapping. I have broken rules to keep that balance before. I will do it again today if I have to. At 9 in the morning, a call comes in from the council office in Portsmouth. The voice belongs to Commander Halverson's aide. She wants a status on the convoy, the inspection issue, and any risk to maintain dosing schedules. I give her the numbers and keep the tone flat. The aide asks if I intend to make a public example of the driver. I tell her the driver looks like a hired hand who ran out of road. I advise holding off on any public punishment until we follow the trail. Silence for 2 beats. Then she agrees. She says the council will support a targeted seizure if we can provide names and a location. She wants proof. Always proof. I ring the tide chart and check the underbridge logs. The retrieval team is already dragging the bodies I cut earlier into a sealed bag. The tag times match what I wrote on the tape. This small confirmation matters. Small confirmations are the bricks that keep the bigger walls standing. A trader I know, Irvin, waves me down near the merchant corral. Irvin has been running household stock since the 2nd winter. He never carries weapons through the gate, and he never lies with a bold face. He lies with silence when he has to, which I respect more. He offers me a tin of coffee. I accept it because it keeps morale even and keeps this old body moving. He leans in and says a name that matches the middleman the driver gave up. Same dock worker, different angle. He mentions a skiff that has been running at night from Craney Island Service Road to a slip near Willoughby. It offloads under the shadow of the bridge when the fog sits low. I slide the coffee into my pocket and I do not respond right away. He has his own reasons for talking. Maybe this ring cut him out. Maybe he wants them scared so he can sell quietly. It does not matter right now. The tip matches independent information. That is enough to move. By 10, I have a small team spinning up. I choose 2 riverine operators, 1 lab runner, and 1 marksman who knows the underside routes better than most. I sign out the short-barreled rifle and bring a bandolier of 3 magazines. I keep the sidearm on my hip and the machete in place. If we catch this ring moving stock in daylight, the angle will be short and sharp. If we have to wait for twilight, we will need patience and silence. I carry a roll of foam sealant and a pry bar. I run through the plan twice with Dent, who will hold the gate in my absence. I tell him exactly when to lock it down, exactly when to let it flow, and exactly what to do if a maintained runner shows up late and needs priority clearance. That last one is not negotiable. Before I move, I step into the radio room and flag our scheduled long-haul window. West Coast Station will hear part of this. The young woman at the set has a clear voice and tighter logs than most. She has been a steady relay when the band is bad. I pass a brief to dispatch for relay later. Note of possible diversion, possible seizure at Craney Island. Request for temporary additional freezer capacity in case we take cold gear off the ring. She confirms the message slot for late afternoon and asks if I want a priority tag. I say yes, and I give the tag code for medical supply protection. It is not a toy, and I do not use it often. I use it now. We step off before 11 and cut south along the service road that splits the industrial yards. The air here always feels like damp metal. The cranes rise up like cold trees. I keep my eyes moving across the shadows under the platforms. It is too bright for the undead to lie close to the surface, but the shade pockets can hide 1 or 2. The riverine pair move ahead and scan with binoculars. The marksman, a quiet woman named Blake, keeps a steady pace and calls out each angle like a metronome. The lab runner is there to sample anything we seize, so we do not waste cold time trucking it back and forth. At Craney Island, the service road bends, and a short chain across the lane blocks the public from driving it, as if anyone still believes the word public means what it used to. We lift the chain and set it back, then continue to the drainage outlet where the ring allegedly stages at night. The tide is out. Mudflats glisten with a thin sheen. If someone has been using skiffs here, we will see drag marks. We do. 2 long scrapes end in a shallow skid that lines up with a moored rope. Someone has walked here with a load more than once. Boots, maybe 2 sets. We take a slow loop and check the neighboring slips. One has a canvas tarp clipped tight. It is too small to hide a person, but it can hide coolers. I drop to a knee, knife a slit, and peek under. Empty. The scent will carry if we open too many of these, so I do not press. We need to watch patterns, not run the table. We park the trucks behind a stack of rusted pipe and set a low-profile hide. I want eyes on this approach when the light shifts. The riverine pair move the small boat into position along the next channel. Engines off. We will use the current to ride into place when needed. Blake takes the high cover on an old catwalk that spans the drainage cut. The lab runner sits tight beside me with a sample kit open and ready. I radio Dent a simple status update and remind him that all normal checks continue. The checkpoint cannot look empty or different. These rings pay attention to routine. Time stretches in the way that makes small errors feel large. I check my watch every few minutes and stop myself from checking a 4th time. The wind shifts, bringing the smell of low tide to us. A gull lands on a piling and pecks at a wrapped bundle of something that has floated into the eddy. The ripple pattern under the bridge tells me nothing is swimming. That is one small relief. A white work van rolls up just before noon and stops 200 feet back from the intake I am watching. The paint is clean, which is rare. 2 men in dock jackets step out, walk to the rear, and open the doors. They pull out a rolling cooler and set it on the asphalt. No conversation, I raise my hand a few inches to signal Blake. She shifts her sightline. The riverine operators remain still in their hidden nook. The men roll the cooler to the edge, take a knee, and scan the channel without much care. That lack of care tells me they have done this more than once without trouble. One points toward Willoughby, the other shakes his head. He plugs a cable from the cooler to a battery pack to keep the cold unit running. Every detail says this is a routine transfer. We wait. Another van pulls in from the opposite side. Different paint, cheaper tires, same careful roll. The driver remains in the seat. The passenger steps out with a clipboard and a short smile that does not reach his eyes. He walks straight to the cooler and taps the lid with his knuckles. He does not open it. He is too confident in his own setup to check. That is good for me. I do not rush because the angle is wrong for a clean take. I want them closer to the water so the backs are to us. So I let one of the dockmen lift the cooler and start the shuffle toward the slip. He puts a foot wrong on a slick spot and has to correct. I use that half second. I motion. We move. I come out first with the rifle raised and give the command voice I have used 1,000 times. Hands up. No movement. Step away from the cooler. Blake has the passenger in her sight. The riverine operators glide out and cover the drivers. No shots. No screaming. The dockmen freeze. The passenger stiffens and sets the clipboard down like it is glass. I keep the muzzle steady and tell them to back up 2 steps. They do. We cuff the 2 dockmen and the passenger. The driver in the second van starts to shake. He puts his hands up without being asked. I pull the cooler lid and check the temperature gauge. It reads within the safe range. The interior holds 3 racks of amber vials, exactly the same color and bottle shape we found in the truck. The lids are unmarked. That by itself is enough to seize. The lab runner opens the sample kit and draws 2 vials with sterile syringes into reader tubes. She loads the first tube. The small screen flickers and prints the same drift pattern as the prior test. Cut serum. I ask the passenger if he knows what he is moving. He says he moves what he is paid to move. He does not make the product. He does not test it. He does not set the route. He looks at the dockmen. Neither meets his stare. That says they are not a close unit. Opportunists who met last month at most. I ask for the key name. The passenger gives me the dock worker's supervisor and claims the route started as a legitimate internal shift from one freezer to another. One day, it turned into an off-book transfer. He does not admit it openly, but the words come easy. He has practiced this speech. We search the vans. The first holds nothing but spare gaskets and a wet tarp. The second holds a clipboard with a batch list that could pass casual inspection. It lists alkaline fluid transfers and pump parts. Nothing about serum, nothing about plasma, nothing about donors. It is the kind of paper you use to skate under a glance. The lab runner snorts but keeps working. She tags the cooler, seals it, and starts a third test just to make sure nothing got contaminated in the field. I call Dent and tell him to hold intake for 20 minutes and to route any maintained priority straight through with escort. Then I call the council office and ask for a small freezer truck and 2 auditors to meet us at the tunnel approach. I want this movement on the books and I want someone else's handwriting beside mine. The aide moves faster this time. She heard my earlier tone. She knows this is not a small bust. We march the 3 men back to the trucks, load the cooler into our bed, and start toward the checkpoint. As we round the last bend, something shifts near the bridge shadow. A shape moves under the vent shaft. Not human posture, low and angled. Blake sees it and calls it. 2 more shapes follow. When the wind pushes a thin layer of heat into those pockets, the dormants rise. The sound of doors and boots did the rest. I hand the rifle to the riverine operator and step forward with the machete. We do not need gunfire under this overpass unless it is mandatory. The first walking dead tilts its head toward the clack of the bed rails. I step in and take it at the base of the skull. The second lurches at the lab runner. The riverine operator intercepts with a push from the butt of his weapon that redirects the body to the ground. He pins it with a knee and gives me the angle. I cut. The third stumbles and nails its shoulder into the column. It rebounds, and that clumsy motion delays the lunge long enough for Blake to drop from the catwalk and crack its neck against the rail with a clean, hard turn. It falls. She steps back fast so she does not get tagged by a blind grasp. We pull back, drag the bodies clear, and spray foam across the small spatter to seal it. The detainees are quiet now. They have just tasted what we keep off their skin every day, and that takes the talk out of a person. We move again, this time with eyes on every dark cavity that can hold a fourth or fifth sleeper. Nothing else moves. We reach the gate in 3 minutes that feel like 30. The freezer truck and auditors arrive within 20. I sign the seizure logs and hand over the cooler for documented transport. The auditors split, one to question the driver, the other to walk the Craney Island site with a camera crew. Not a public video, internal review. Someone in the council chamber will watch it and make a decision about charges and integration versus full dismantle. I state my position on the record. I want the cold gear and the vans folded into the legitimate chain. I want the human ring charged and placed under monitored labor, with the right to petition for reduction after a set period. I want the middleman named, charged, and barred from any dock job in the region. I want the supervisor who allowed a hole in inventory to lose his seat. I am not calling for a hanging. Public harm is real, but a dead ring teaches less than a folded one with eyes on it. While the auditors do their run, I walk the merchant corral and check on the pair from earlier. The lab cleared their cooler as normal plasma. Old handwriting, true dates. They are clean. I release them with a warning to stop playing clever with pen strokes. One grins like a kid caught with a hand in a jar. The other avoids my eyes and says he understands. He probably does not. He just wants through the gate. By early afternoon, the heat settles and the hum of generators grows louder than the sea. A maintenance crew climbs the tower to check the flickering lights. I remind them not to overdraw the auxiliary loop. Last week, a junction box sparked and cooked a relay in Portsmouth. That blackout almost cost us a donor cycle. The crew chief nods with a face that says he has the same warning from 3 different supervisors. Welcome to the new world. Redundancy is the only thing that still works. I check the maintained schedule and see the sewer team slated for a vent inspection at 3 in the afternoon. This operation has been on the board for a week. Dry weather makes it the right window to clear out mud and keep the lower tunnels from becoming a nest. The 2 climbers assigned are a husband and wife unit I know by sight. He moves like a rope worker. She keeps the logs and dose schedule. Their spare cartridges are clipped to a strap on her chest. She never misses a check. Good. I tag the operation as priority movement through Alpha when they arrive, and I tell Dent to clear them ahead of any trader. The lab phones me at 2:15. The cut serum we seized matches a drift in 2 past incidents in small towns to the west. Maintained workers collapsed after exertion and missed recovery. The common element in both cases was a middle-of-the-road donor lot that showed signs of being stretched. No one could prove it then. We can now. The lab wants to send a protocol update to all outposts. I approve the push and ask for the plain language version to stick on the checkpoint board. Technicians like to write for other technicians. Guard crews need clean sentences and short lists. What to look for, what to do, who to call. At 2:40, the husband and wife team arrive at the gate. Both wear tinted goggles. Both have the smooth, slow set to their steps that maintained workers carry when the dose is steady. I move to the lane and check their gear. They carry pry bars, foam cans, light rope, a short pump, and 2 small shields for bats and rats. He smiles once when he sees me and says he appreciates the priority. I tell him it is not a favor, it is the job. She taps her dose timer. 4 hours until the window. They will be in and out by then. She keeps notes like a surgeon. Good. They pass through and the small escort follows them by 20 yards. I watch their backs recede, and I feel that old tight line that runs along my scalp. When a maintained team walks into a dark place, I do not speak it. I do not call it fear. I just adjust the rifle sling and keep working, because attention is how we buy luck. At 3:10, the audit pair returns from Craney with a preliminary report. The supervisor at the dock claims ignorance. His inventory sheets look clean, but the chain shows opportunity. He could have signed off on a shift between freezers without a second witness. The audit wants to freeze his authority for now and run a full stock check. That will slow legitimate work for days. I say do it. A fast line with holes is worse than a slow line under watch. A quarter hour later, the radio gives me the call I did not want. The sewer team is late with the first check-in. Not fatal. That vent line sometimes blocks the set. Still, I log it and move closer to the access road so I can shorten my response time if needed. The escort radios in and says the team is at the second bend, setting foam on a door that warped in the last storm. A small cluster of roamers moved in the shade beyond the grate. The team will draw them out through a maze of carts. No gunfire. I tell him to keep it that way unless a fast one shows. Fresh turns can pop up even years into this mess. All it takes is a wound and a minute of bad luck. At 3:30, a trader I do not know walks up to the fence with a sealed box and a request to see me. Dent keeps him at the outer line and calls me. I meet the man with the steel mesh between us. He says he has information about the seizure and that he wants to trade for entry for his brother's family. I tell him no barter at the fence. We do not set that precedent. He holds up a photograph. It shows a small freezer with the same brand as the one we confiscated, sitting in a garage with a dock number spray painted on the concrete behind it. He says this is the backup site where the ring stores overflow before dawn. He says he does not want money. He wants his family to move into a safer block before winter. His eyes do not blink much. That can be a tell for a liar, but it can also be the face of a man who has not slept. I ask for the address. He gives me a number that lines up with the service corridor near Willoughby. I tell him to wait. I walk back to Dent, hand him the photograph, and tell him to log the approach. We will check the site tonight. If the photo leads to more serum, I will make the case for his request. He nods once and backs off into the queue. At 3:50, the sewer team checks in from the final bend. Clear. They found a small mess of dormants stacked like furniture against the far wall. Foam, pry, push, head check, move on. The escort says the team will be out in 10. I breathe once and nod even though he cannot see it. When the two climb out into the light at 4 flat, I step forward to lay eyes on them. Both intact. Both composed. She taps her timer again. 2 hours to dose window. They make for the clinic with an easy gait. I flag the nurse in charge and tell her to pre-stage a kidney panel for him. He looks a touch pale. She rolls her eyes at me like I am overreaching. I shrug. He thanks me without words. Late afternoon folds in, and the line thins. The sun slides toward the yards and paints the cranes with an ugly glare. A patrol returns from the bridge with a report of a child's bicycle found near a cracked barrier. No rider, no footprints. The patrol marked the spot with a flag and left it undisturbed. I take that personally. The world teaches kids not to wander, but kids still wander. That is how grief keeps finding work. Before we roll on the Willoughby address, I brief the team on the approach. 2 trucks, 4 officers, 1 lab runner. We will not breach a wall unless we have proof behind the door. We will look for power lines that do not match the rest of the block. We will look for condensation on a window where it does not belong. We will listen at the seam. I choose the same riverine pair and Blake. Dent will hold the gate with 2 seasoned guards and the maintenance chief. We move at 5:30. Traffic is light. Remains of traffic anyway. The service streets near the water carry a quiet that makes tires sound too loud. When we reach the address from the photograph, we see a detached garage with a steel roll-up door that looks newer than the others on the block. Fresh bolts on the brackets, a clean padlock, no tags. That alone could be nothing. People harden doors for all kinds of reasons. I crouch and slide a hand along the seam. It is cool. That is a sign. I lift a finger to Blake and she slides around back. She calls out a low whisper. She sees a ventilation hose snaked through a cut at the rear. That much effort for a garage, says a cooling unit inside. I wrap the padlock with the pry bar. No answer from inside. No human voice. No move. I look at the riverine operator on my right and nod. He cuts the lock with a small bolt cutter. We lift the door 2 feet and stop. Cold air slides out over my forearms. I smell chemicals and plastic. No rot. That is a blessing. I lift the door another foot and sweep with the muzzle light. The beam finds a chest freezer against the back wall, a generator beside it, and a stack of coolers along the side. A simple setup that could serve a small clinic or a small crime. The difference is in the labels and the test. We step inside slow, staying off-center. The lab runner moves in behind me with the test kit ready. I stop her and tell her to wait until I clear the corners. A shape sits behind the cans near the freezer. It does not move. I walk right to it and touch it with the barrel. A mannequin torso with a shirt draped over it. Someone used it to hold the door for photography or to scare off a casual thief. I feel a cheap anger at that small trick. I breathe it out and move on. The lab runner opens the freezer. The cold smoke slides over the rim. Inside are 5 racks, amber vials again, identical to the field pool. She runs the reader. Same drift, cut product. On the wall, a clipboard shows dates and names in 2 handwritings. One column lists real lot numbers that match known movements between 2 legitimate sites. The second column lists buffer with a letter code that means nothing to me. That second column likely maps to the adulterated stock. The person who wrote this thought he was clever with his code. He was not clever enough to keep it in his head. We seal the freezer, tag it, and photograph the setup. The generator is small and serviceable. We wheel the whole thing onto the truck and lock the garage back up. I leave a note inside for the next person who comes to check the stash. It is a simple piece of tape that says, "Property seized by Corridor Authority. Report to Checkpoint Alpha for hearing." That message will pull someone bold into my house, where the odds tilt my way. On the drive back, the radio picks up a familiar voice with a stable signal. The West Coast operator pushes a message through the band while the sun is still up. She confirms receipt of my earlier brief and adds a relay from the Great Lakes corridor. They have an algae cofactor shipment moving east and want a secure freezer when it hits the coast in 3 days. I answer with yes and mark the storage. Then, she warns of a storm flare in the forecast that could mess with night propagation. She suggests a lower frequency window at 9 in the evening. I thank her and log it. Professional, clear. That kind of operator keeps missions alive when gear fails. We hit the checkpoint at 7. The gate looks normal from a distance. That is exactly how I want it. Dent hands me a ceramic mug of something that tastes close enough to coffee to pass. He says the driver from the seizure has not asked for a lawyer. We do not have many lawyers. He has asked for water and silence. He got both. The auditors are writing. The counsel aide called to say the commander will want a formal brief in the morning. I step outside the office and take 10 minutes on the bench. The world, when it is quiet like this, shows every hairline crack. The fence mesh hums with the wind. The tunnel lights flicker less now that the maintenance crew did their patch. The sea sends a chill up the concrete. The smell of foam fixer lingers where we sealed a spill. I do not let myself sink. I drink the coffee, plan the night shifts, and think through the questions the commander will ask. Proof is lined up, chain of custody catalogued, personnel list ready. Outcome asks still in flux. The wife from the maintain team returns at 7:30 with a small cart. She is alone. That twang in my scalp returns hard enough to feel like a physical push. She walks straight to me and says her husband felt strange during the climb back and asked for a second check before dosing. She did the right thing and held him from taking the cartridge until a lab tech could look at his oral temp and pupil response. Then he excused himself to the washroom and did not come out. She found him sitting on the floor with his back against the stall, staring at the wall. He answered her name, then lost the thread and gripped his knees hard enough to leave marks. She hit the alert and 2 medics moved him to a cot. They did a half dose and started fluids. He is stable now, but the timing was thin. Too thin. I ask if he missed a dose. She says no. Timer said he had an hour and a half. They always bring spares. She was holding the spare. I ask if he bled during the vent work. She says he cut a knuckle on a bolt and that she cleaned it with sterile water and sealed it before they moved. I ask if he ate or drank anything unverified. She says no. I ask if he took any supplement from an unofficial source. Her look tells me she would never allow it. She is the kind who reads every lot number on a bandage box. I believe her. My stomach turns with something that is not hunger. I ask the lab if any ST-43 lots in circulation show signs of drift. The tech says all active lots in our region tested clean this week. I ask for the lot number on the husband's cartridge. She checks and reads it off. I compare it to the board. It is clean. That means the cause could be exertion stress, and that little cut, plus the late-day heat, plus the weight of 12 years on a system that has been holding back a tide with a spoon. Sometimes the answer is not conspiracy. Sometimes the answer is the body just ran out of margin for the day. Even so, I mark it. I have seen rings push cut product through in small amounts to test the water. If anything odd shows up near a seizure day, I take it as a pattern until proven otherwise. At 8, I call the ring's middleman's supervisor in for a talk. He tried to duck the earlier audit. He cannot duck me. He shows up in a jacket too clean for this kind of work. I sit him in the same room where the driver sat. I lay out the photos, the vials, the reader results, and the clipboard from the garage. I keep my voice even. I ask him to explain why his dock carries have unlogged freezer shifts at off hours. He says he authorized a series of maintenance moves because a freezer was frosting too fast. I ask for the maintenance logs. He stares at me like I just spoke another language. I ask for the electrician's name. He gives me a name that does not match anyone who worked on our grid this year. I tell him to keep his hands on the table where I can see them. He does. I ask him if he knows that cut serum kills maintained workers in slow motion. He opens his mouth and closes it. I tell him a husband almost slipped today. He tries to make a face of concern and ends up making nothing. I do not play for a confession. I play for accountability. I list the charges: diversion of medical property, conspiracy to move altered medication, endangerment of protected labor. He will sit in a cell like the driver, and he will see a magistrate. He will work under guard until a council panel decides if he ever sees a dock again. At 9, we hit the lower frequency window and pass the day's full report to the West Coast relay. The operator confirms, sends a clean acknowledgement, and adds a short note about a convoy that crossed a contested span without incident because the earlier frequency shift you requested reached them in time. She gives credit where it belongs, and that small gesture steadies me. Radio is a lifeline, and lifelines need people who treat time like a blade. The night shift takes the gate, and I keep a seat in the shadow of the tower. I work best in sight of the line. Traders trickle in with late passes. A fisher brings a net of small mullet and trades for fuel credits. 2 kids with wary eyes trail a woman who carries a box of salvaged books tied with a belt. She wants a dry corner to set up a small school. I assign a patrolman to walk her to the library bunker and sneak 2 extra candles into her hand when the sergeant looks away. I am not embarrassed by gestures like that. Those small lights are the only reason this place is not just a fence and a schedule. Near midnight, a watcher on the west ramp calls out motion under the rail span. Standard. The undead move more after dark when the air cools and damp rises. The team handles it with foam and quiet strikes. One of the new guards gets his sleeve nicked on a sharp edge and swears hard enough to echo. I correct him for the language in open comm. He groans and apologizes. We keep the radio clean not to be polite, but because kids listen on cheap sets in the housing block. The night carries enough fear without the adults adding rotten words to it. I doze for an hour in the chair with my boots up on an ammo crate and wake to the sound of the freezer truck humming. The seized cooler sits inside, locked and tagged. A guard reads a book beside it. He looks up, nods, and goes back to his page. He is reading about how bridges are built. Good choice for a man whose job is to stand between 2 halves of a broken city. Dawn comes grey and flat. The commander calls for the brief at 7. I stand in the office with the photos on the wall and the vials on the table. The council aide sits with a pen and a cold face. The commander listens without interruption. When I finish, he asks a short set of questions about chain of custody, test validity, and expected public impact. Then he asks for my recommendation. I give it. Fold the gear into the legitimate chain now. Freeze the ring's access and set bonded labor terms for the men who moved the coolers. Pull the supervisor and any handler 1 layer up and hold them until we finish the inventory and interview their team. Issue an alert bulletin to every corridor with the cut signature so matching drifts can be traced. Offer a leniency window of 1 week for anyone holding altered stock to turn it over with no further penalties. He nods. He looks at the aide and tells her to draft the bulletin and the leniency window. She looks surprised. He looks at me like he already fought that argument in his head and chose the hard right. The public announcement goes out at 9, not a show, a straightforward list of facts and steps. Traders grumble. A wrong man shouts that we are soft on criminals. A right woman points out that dead coolers serve no one. The chatter fades by mid-morning, and work resumes because survival leaves little room for grudge theatre. Just when I think we might get a quiet midday, a runner comes up the access road with her arms pinwheeling for attention. She is from a coastal pocket outside the fence, who sometimes trades fish and salt. She says a group of men hit her camp last night and took a donor she knows by name. Her voice breaks once and then steadies. The men wore dock jackets. They moved with purpose. They left by water. The description fits more than one crew, but the timing is too close to our seizure to ignore. I ask her if the donor is from our authorized list. She nods. She says the donor has the markers that make the lab put her on the high-priority draw schedule. That is a rare kind of person right now, and a tempting target for a ring that wants to sell raw material off the books. I call the riverine pair again. I bring Blake. I do not ask the commander. I tell the aide where I am going and why. If this crew thinks it can push back after a public hit, we will set the tone that the fence is not only a ledger, but a blade. We follow the coastal track where the runner points. The tide is up. The reeds bow in a light wind that turns the surface into a rippled sheet. We see the scuff marks where a skiff landed on a narrow sand tongue. We see a smear where someone was dragged or walked against her will. The lab runner swabs it for inventory. The marks lead toward a sub-channel under a broken section of the old causeway. That is a bad hole. It opens into a pocket under a collapsed lane, where sound reflects and multiplies. A perfect place to hide gear from patrols, and a perfect place to get trapped by a nest if you are unlucky. We go in slow. I leave the truck back with the runner because the ground near the water is mushy and loves to eat tires. We advance along the concrete lip with the rifle up and the machete still sheathed. I do not want to remove the option of quiet until I must. As we reach the pocket, voices echo. Not many words. The rhythm says 3 men working a load. The tin rattle says coolers. The whine says a generator. I stop and hold up a hand. Blake slides to the opposite side and gives me the smallest nod. She has eyes on a head and a shoulder. The riverine pair takes a low crouch behind a slab and waits for the move. I call out with authority, loud enough to cut the generator hum, but not enough to rattle the whole shore. Hands up and step away from the coolers. Corridor authority. This site is seized. A man shouts back that we have no claim off the main road. He is wrong and he knows it. He hopes I will doubt. I do not doubt. I repeat the order. He steps into view with a broken nose face and a shotgun held at hip level. That posture tells me he is not trained. He wants threat without the hit. Bad mix. I keep the muzzle of my rifle fixed and I stare not at his weapon but at his foot placement. If he shifts weight, he may fire from panic. Blake speaks one clean sentence. If you lift that barrel higher, you will not get a second chance. The man freezes. The other 2 step into view with empty hands raised. The generator hum keeps running because no one thought to shut it off. That idle noise carries far. I do not like that. I order the shotgun down. The man lowers it a few inches. I tell him to set it on the ground and step back. He obeys, slow as oil. We cuff him first, then the others. The coolers sit open with amber glints inside. On a crate, I see a small pouch with a needle kit and a tourniquet. That is not for serum. That is for drawing blood. I feel anger rise like a kettle left too long on a hot plate. I do not let it boil. I say the donor's name to see if anyone flinches. The youngest man looks away. That is enough. I step to the edge of the slab and scan the water beneath for a shape that does not belong. I see a shadow under the ledge. It moves and then goes still. A hand gripping a chain. The fingers are not the fingers of an old walking dead. They have strength. I call down and tell the person my name and position, and that we have her captors in restraints. No answer. I am not sure she trusts anyone right now, and she should not. I lower my rifle, put the machete away, and climb down with my hands open, slow. If she swings the chain, I will take the hit and try again. I reach the last step and see her face. Blood on the cheek from a small cut near the hairline. Eyes sharp and not fogged. The donor. She looks at me like a cornered dog, ready to bite and run. Good. Alive. I tell her I will not touch her. I tell her I have a medtech 2 minutes away with clean water. I tell her I know her lab code and I recite the first 2 digits. That trick is not perfect, but it signals that I am who I say I am. She blinks once and steps out from behind the chain. She keeps it in her hand. She is not surrendering it. I do not ask her to. We move back to the slab together. The lab runner meets us with a small bottle and a packet of saline wipes. The donor cleans her cut and never takes her eyes off the men in cuffs. Back at the checkpoint, we put the 3 men in separate cells and start the small, grinding process that turns events into records. The donor wants to leave immediately for her camp, but the lab asks for a brief observation window because head cuts can hide bad turns. She pounds her fist once on the table like it is trying to jump out of her skin. Then she nods and sits for the observation. She demands to call her camp. I hand her my radio and ask dispatch to patch her through. A woman answers and sobs once when she hears the voice. The donor does not break. She gives facts and ends the call. The council aide arrives in person at noon with 2 guards at her back. She looks at the vials, the generator, and the men in cuffs, then at me. She asks if I want to change my recommendation. I say no. The ring tried to hurt a person who keeps people alive. A hanging would feel righteous to some, but what it teaches will not last. What lasts is converting every piece of gear, every route, every habit into a controlled artery that feeds the lab instead of poisoning it. She nods. She takes down statements. She walks away with a face that is hard to read. The donor is cleared at 2, with a butterfly bandage and a pack of antibiotics for the cut. She refuses an escort back to camp, then accepts one after I give her a realistic picture of the route at this hour. She shakes my hand once like a person who just survived the day and wants to mark it. She leaves. The weight in my head moves enough to let me breathe without counting it. People call what we do law, but it is more like balance. Help the right person, hit the wrong one. Keep the gate moving. Let a harmless stack of soap pass with a wink and a coffee tin in my pocket. Stop a cooler that smells like money and death. Respect the rule book enough to keep it useful, but not so much that it turns into a shield for cowards. Some nights I think I should die for how simple I make it sound. Then the sun comes up and I do it again because the power grid is held together by hope and copper and sweat, and hope needs guards with machetes. The next week runs hot. Word of the bust makes waves. Traders show up early with correct labels. Dock crews grumble. The lab pushes a new test protocol that flags the drift faster. The council sets the leniency window and announces it at the central plaza. 4 separate parties bring in cut vials with lowered eyes. They leave without charges. I do not smile or frown when I watch it. That is not my job. I just count vials and make sure the real ones keep leaving my gate and getting into the arms of people who bleed for all of us. And then the storm that the West Coast operator warned me about rolls in, and the grid stumbles hard. Wind throws salt spray sideways. The tunnel lights fail. The auxiliary sputters. We go to hard low power with hand signals and flares. The infected move differently in this weather. They gather where windshields sound and rush as a group when a noise breaks the pattern. A crowd of packers forms near the mouth of the old service tunnel. I take a quiet squad and show them the route we built last winter, with sheet steel and foam cans, that makes a maze the packers cannot solve fast. We lure them in with a small radio clipped to the mesh, then walk them one by one into traps we can manage. It is not clean. It never is. It is silent enough to avoid waking the whole yard. A day later, the maintained husband returns to work on limited duty. He looks tired around the eyes, but steady. His wife stands closer to him than usual. No shame in that. I stand in front of them and tell him I am glad he stayed with us. He says nothing. He puts a hand on my shoulder for 1 second and walks on. Some words do not need to be spoken in a world where the cost is written on every wrist. Our small victory over the serum ring does not erase the bigger truth. The old world still works, but barely. The ships that sit at the naval station are hulks that provide parts, not fleets that leave on missions. The bridges carry guard posts and trap nets, not vacation traffic. The hospitals are clinics with batteries and freezers stacked in rooms where doctors once argued about billing codes. The radio tower hums. The antenna guy patches lines with braided wire and stubbornness. Kids learn math under orange lamps and count supply crates as practice. And I keep doing what I do, which is say yes, say no, and swing steel when the undead roll too close to my boots. The commander calls me in 3 weeks later with a new assignment on top of my checkpoint duties. He wants me to run a small training cycle for junior officers on how to read a convoy without turning the road into a graveyard. He says word of our seizure and the way we handled it reached 2 other corridors. He says they sent notes of thanks and a request for my brief. I shrug and say the brief is nothing but steps and common sense. He smiles for the first time in a month and says common sense is not common and steps save lives. I write the brief. It is short. Look at the paint on the bolts. Look at the way a man sets a cooler down. Look at the angle of a driver's eyes. Test 3 random drums. Never trust a clean clipboard alone. If a donor goes missing, move like it is your mother. If a maintained worker starts to drift, stop the world until he is safe. Do not fire a weapon under a bridge unless your feet are already moving to a new position. If you take a bribe, make sure it is coffee and not blood. On the night before I deliver the first class, I sit under the tower and watch the water level creep up the concrete. The world is not healed. It is not dead either. It sits in this uncertain place where every choice can tilt it one way or the other. I am not a good man. I am not a bad man. I am the man at the gate. If I am strict where I need to be and soft where I can afford it, that might be enough to carry this place through another winter. When the class ends the following afternoon, a recruit asks me what I carry that helps me sleep. He wants me to say a prayer book or a charm from before the collapse. I tell him the truth. I carry inventory lists written in clean ink and a machete that cuts straight. He laughs once, then sees I am not joking, then nods like he understands. I dismiss the class and walk back to the lane. A convoy is approaching. The floodlights flicker. The sea smells like salt and metal. The infected are sleeping under the bridge until the wrong sound wakes them. I tap the machete against my thigh and set my shoulders. Work is not a story. Work is a choice you make every day until the day you fall. I step into the lane and raise my hand for the lead driver to stop at the line. I hear the engine idle settle into the same steady note I have listened to for 12 years. I feel the fence behind me like a spine. And now it's time to get back to work. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to keep the stories alive. For now, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and stay alive. Jack's Nightmares, signing off. Until next time, survivor.